Rachel, I'm just reminding you, 2 o'clock, I have to fetch Rosie. Well, I have to get cash to Simon. I have to get the Chumash for her. Hello, Jeff.
Hi, Rabbi. How are you?
Baruch Hashem, and you?
Yeah, Baruch Hashem.
Good.
And I certainly hope to stay that way. Been a terrible year.
Well, where do you stay?
In Rambam,
And
part of Rabbi Bacher's congregation.
moved from Blairgowrie to Hurlingham.
Yeah.
Does that suit you?
Yeah, for me, it's okay. I don't have a problem there.
And how's it going?
How's it going? I think it's going well. We're getting quite strong minyanim on Shabbos. And we just now got to go to the next level.
Any new people?
I think there are about five or six in the last year.
And you retained the originals?
Not all of them, unfortunately.
Some of them, the move didn't suit them.
Yeah. Yeah. For whatever reason that didn't suit them. I know one couple moved to the other side of town, to the what's that area called? Glen Hazel side. And other people just felt they didn't want to move. And in terms of the distance that they were walking, the distance, okay, so now some of them are going to Victory Park, and Victory Park is actually a little bit further than Hurlingham. One walks. So
it was sort of dafka.
Yeah, and to each his own.
Can't win them all.
And are you in Cape Town permanently now?
I'm not in Cape Town, I'm in Johannesburg.
No, but you seem to be doing a lot of traveling to Cape Town.
We've got 4 kids in Cape Town and a bunch of grandchildren. We were there for Sukkot.
Okay.
So I think I gave the share over Sukkot from Cape Town. But other than that, we were just there for the week, 10 days.
Okay.
Hello, Rabbi.
Hello, Kent.
It's a good place to go for a holiday.
How's the weather in Cape Town today?
Nice, warm, pleasant, very pleasant. Thank you. And you okay up your way?
A bit cloudy today, but yesterday was gorgeous. Shabbos was warm, hot. But I'm going into winter. I'm going to America for a couple of weeks. So
Okay.
not gonna see you guys for a little while.
Safe travels.
Thank you.
We'll see you after a while.
Thank you. I'm going to the Kinnis of the Chabad rabbis this coming Shabbos and weekend, and then I have a lecture tour of North America. I'm going to Atlanta, Chicago, Kansas City, Pittsburgh,
Whoa,
and a couple of more cities in the pipeline.
amazing.
So
Wonderful.
Fantastic.
opening a new chapter. Okay. Is it 1 o'clock yet? Yes, it is. Right. Welcome, everybody. Hello, Stephen. Hello, Dennis.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
We're ready to roll. So, Isurei Mizbeach, what is forbidden to go on the Mizbeach, the altar of God in the temple. So, you may have learned about the sacrifices and the offerings, and we had it the other week. We were learning about the mumim, the blemishes that would disqualify an animal from being offered on the temple altar. And now he says that Kishem Shemitzvah is called Korban Tomim, just like it is a mitzvah for all the offerings to be Tomim, that is unblemished and of the highest quality. So too, it's not limited to the animal offerings, but all the accompanying offerings, the auxiliary offerings, so to speak, that go along with the animals, must likewise be unblemished and of the highest quality, as the verse says, Timimim yu lachem v'niskayim. They shall be perfect. Meaning that things like wine libations, it's called nisochim in Hebrew. They would pour wine down the altar, called libations. So they too have to be, the wine has to be unblemished. I'm sure you've had some wine that tasted like vinegar in your experiences. There are other issues which would disqualify wine as well. So you should not bring wine libation that have been affected by smoke, nor flour. Okay, people, let's say a poor person cannot afford an animal. He can bring fowl. If he can't afford even a bird, he can bring a mincha, korban mincha, a flour, a meal offering of flour. But if the flour is worm infested, it is disqualified. Nor should he mix the flour with oil that is foul smelling or foul tasting. I'll just share with you a little funny, sad but funny little incident that happened many years ago. I don't know if I ever shared this with you, but we were still living back in Berea and davening in the Hasidic shul on Hara Road, Yovel in those days. And the Chabad Machzor had just been published with an English translation for the first time. So this is pre-1983, somewhere, let's say circa 1980. The first edition of the Chabad Yom Kippur Machzor in English. And in the middle of the Yom Kippur service, in the middle of Musaf, one of the congregants discovered a typo in the new print. But now some typos are just typos. Some typos are a disaster. And he showed it to one person and to another, and before long, the whole congregation was giggling. In the middle of Yom Kippur, it was embarrassing. What was it? Instead of libations of wine, it said libations of swine. Can you believe that? I mean, I think it was an anti-Semitic typesetter. Anyway, okay. So you can't bring libations of swine either. 2, similarly, the wood. Okay, you have wood that's on the altar that creates a fire for the animals to be burnt. The wood also has to be of the highest quality. You may have learned elsewhere that we have something called Tu B'Av in the Jewish calendar, the 15th of Av. It's a day when we don't say Tachnun, and it was traditionally a day when shidduchim were made in Jerusalem, and a lot of people get married. One of my sons got married on Tu B'Av. It's a good day to get married. And one of the historical occurrences on Tu B'Av, there's about half a dozen things that make it a particularly important day. One of them was that they would accept wood for the altar only on up until the 15th of Av. Wood that was chopped only up until the 15th of Av. Why? Because in Israel, the northern hemisphere, it is summer in Av. Av is usually July, August. But from the 15th of Av, the sun starts dimming. It's sort of the solstice or whatever, that the 15th of Av is the, after the 15th of Av, it starts going towards autumn, which means that the sun is not as powerful, which means that the wood on the ground will not be as dry as it was before the 15th of Av, when there's a powerful sun to dry the wood. The upshot of not having a powerful sun to dry the wood is that if the wood is moist, it will attract worms. And it is inappropriate and unacceptable for wood on the altar of God to have worms. So therefore, they would not accept wood that was chopped after the 15th of Av. So likewise here, we see that one of the qualifications for wood, any tree that is worm infested, when it is fresh, is unacceptable for the altar. If it became worm infested and dried out, once you scrape away the place that became worm infested, wood that comes from a building that was torn down is invalid. It has to be new wood. You can't use old boards from a destroyed building. It has to be fresh wood from the tree, from the forest. But there may be no worms. There is an unresolved doubt, number 3, when one consecrates invalid wine, flour, oil, or wood to the altar. Is it like he gave a blemished animal, in which instance he would actually be guilty of a very serious sin and be punished with lashes? Or is it not quite as bad as a blemished animal, and he wouldn't be liable for lashes? He would be given lashes rabbinically. It's called Makas Mardus, rebellious conduct. The rabbis said even though he's not biblically liable, if somebody behaves badly, the rabbis could impose it also. Number 4, fine flour, wine, oil, frankincense, fowl, wood, and sacred utensils became invalid or impure, should not be redeemed. Okay, so now sometimes you can redeem something which was consecrated. Something went wrong, and then you give something else. And the object that was redeemed can be used for ordinary stuff. But here he says, if it was already designated as sacred, then it cannot be redeemed. And he quotes the verse, whatever can be caused to stand before a priest can be evaluated. These cannot be caused, as therefore they are never redeemed. Okay, it's a bit of a Talmudic interpretation. When does this apply? When they became invalidated or impure after they became sanctified in a sacred vessel in the temple. But before that, they may still be redeemed. Pure objects, by contrast, should not be redeemed, even if they were not consecrated in a sacred utensil, with the exception of the flour brought as a sin offering. Because there in the Chumash, we find in Vayikra, Mechatato, Al Chatato, to teach us, we learn from this that one may bring a sin offering from the money of the sin offering. Therefore, before it was consecrated in the sacred, it is considered as consecrated for its monetary value and can be redeemed even though it is ritually pure. That's an exception. A separate arrangement of wood should be made for all of the accompanying offers that became impure, and they should be burned on the altar. Okay, so we don't use them, but we burn them. Following laws apply regard to the water for the libation of Sukkot. Now, Sukkot is different. You heard of Sukkot wasn't so long ago. You may have heard the term Simchat Beit HaShoeva. Excuse me. Simchat Beit HaShoeva were huge celebrations on Sukkot in the temple in Jerusalem over the water drawing. They would draw water with great pomp and ceremony from the nearby special river wellspring. And on a whole year, they pour wine on the altar accompanying the sacrifices. On Sukkot, they don't pour wine, they pour water. And there's a lot of symbolism between wine and water and the differences between wine and water, which we don't have time for now. But Sukkot is very much associated with water, because at the end of Sukkot, we have a prayer on Shmini Atzeret called Geshem. We pray for rain. And usually the best way to end the drought is to build a sukkah, right? So Sukkot is actually the season of rain. We don't ask for rain till Shmini Atzeret because we don't want to get our sukkahs rained out. But really, Sukkot is the time when we need rain in Israel. So water is very much associated with Sukkot, and therefore on Sukkot, instead of pouring wine libations, it was libations of water. So if the water for the Sukkot libations became impure, and then it was joined to a mikveh, what's the din? If he purified it and then consecrated, it may be used for libations. If it was consecrated and then became impure, if it was disqualified, it remains disqualified. 7. So this is talking about a Shabbos. The notes tell us it's talking about a Shabbos because if it was during the week, they would just get other water from the Gihon stream. But on Shabbos, it's forbidden. So the only alternative is to restore the ritual purity of the water. 7. When olives and grapes became impure, they should be crushed less than an egg-sized portion at a time. Just looking at the notes here. Because he says, impure food will not cause other foods or liquids to contract ritual impurity unless the original impure food is the size of an egg-sized portion. Okay, so therefore he says you crush it to less than an egg-sized portion at a time, and it can never be a source of tumah, of ritual impurity. 8. Our sages established an additional safeguard with regard to consecrated objects. When seeds become impure, even if they are later sown, the produce that grows from them is not acceptable for the accompanying offerings, for sowing produce is not effective in restoring ritual purity for consecrated entities. That's interesting. So you have some seeds, it became tomei, and you plant the seeds, and now you get new growth. The new growth is still tainted by those impure seeds that it was planted from. Very interesting. Similarly, with regard to wood and frankincense, which was also used on the altar, even though they are inedible, they can become impure like foods with regard to the sacrifices, in which case the wood and the sap become disqualified the altar because of this impurity and should not be used. 9. Okay, we spoke about wine that tasted like vinegar, but there's other kinds of disqualifications for wine too. These are the types of wine that are invalid as libations for the altar. Sweetened wine, smoked wine, wine cooked over fire or in the sun until its flavor was changed by the cooking. The types of wine to be listed should not be brought as libations as an initial preference, but if they were brought, they are acceptable. What is that list? Wine which was warmed in the sun, but its flavor did not change due to the cooking. Similarly, raisin wine. You ever had raisin wine? I remember in America they used to have raisin wine. But I don't think you make hagofen. I think raisin wine is shahakol, if I'm not mistaken. Similarly, raisin wine, wine from the vat that is less than 40 days old, wine from grapes grown on trellises, wine from a vineyard in an arid region or in a dung heap, wine from vines in which other produce was sown between them, or wine from a vineyard that was not tilled, All of the above are not ideal, but if they were used, it's acceptable. So in the first instance, you shouldn't use it. After the event, it's acceptable. 10, wine that was left uncovered should not be used for libations. What's wrong with uncovered? Uncovered for how long? So usually when he speaks about beverages that are uncovered, it usually means overnight or for a significant amount of time that when nobody was around watching it. What are we worried about? Anybody know? When wine was left uncovered, it is forbidden because it is possible that a snake might have deposited venom in it. Hence, it is forbidden for the altar. I spent this past Shabbos with my wife at the Santon Shul. We were guest speakers for the Shabbos project, and Rabbi Shur, the rabbi of the Santon Shul, was telling us a story that he once had a snake in his house. So I knew Santon was the northern suburbs, but I didn't know it was so out in the sticks that they have snakes in the house. Anyway, he called a snake guy, and he laughed. It was not a poisonous snake. He was playing with the snake. Anyway, I would have run the other way. Anyway, wine uncovered is prohibited for the altar because a snake, we don't know what happened overnight or while we weren't looking, and therefore the best idea is not to keep it uncovered. If one draped a vine over a fig tree, its wine is unacceptable for libation because its fragrance has changed. The verse states zevach unesochim, sacrifice and libations, equating the two, just as the appearance of a zevach, an animal offering as a sacrifice, may not change, so too the libations may not change. And this type of arrangement would change it. 11, when the majority of fine flour has become worm-ridden, or the majority of the kernels of wheat have become worm-ridden, and flour was made from them, it is unacceptable on the altar of God. If the majority of one kernel of wheat became worm-ridden, there is an unresolved doubt whether it's acceptable or not. Whenever flour dust remains in the fine flour, it is unacceptable. So normally we sift the flour, don't we? Even to make challah. The ladies sift the flour, which is important because very often you find creepy crawlies and all kinds of yucky stuff in the flour, and therefore it has to be sifted because all that stuff is not only despicable and disgusting, it's also not kosher. And you could violate 5 biblical commandments if you eat a chochel. So even though in Asia it might be a delicacy, we do not eat chochos. But besides that fact, for the altar, it's also unacceptable, and therefore you have to be very careful and make sure that there's no dust. How do you check? The treasurer, that's the kohen in charge of the temple treasury, inserts his hand into the fine flour. If dust clings to it, as he removes it, it is unacceptable until it is sifted again to get it more refined. Fine flour from wheat that grew in an arid land, a dung heap, an orchard, on land that was not left fallow and tilled, all of the above should not be brought initially. Again, after the event, if it was brought, in halacha, the term is called bid'e eved, it is acceptable. So the Hebrew terms, the Talmudic terms, the first instance is called lichatchila, and after the event, it's called bid'e eved, if it was already done. Those are the Talmudic terms that you might want to be familiar with. 13, when wheat kernels were collected from cattle feces, another yuchi situation, and then sown in the ground. Now we have a machlekes in the Talmud, different opinions. There's an unresolved doubt if their disgusting characteristic coming from cattle's feces has left because they were now sown and now something new is growing. Or are they still considered disgusting? And if they're considered disgusting, they may not be offered on the altar. So rather don't bring it, because there are opinions that say yes, opinions that say no. So therefore the Rambam gives us good advice, stay away from it. If he did, however, it's kosher. 14, these are the oils which are unacceptable: oil from olives soaked in water, or of pickled or cooked olives, or from olive dregs, or foul-smelling oil. All of the above are unacceptable. In contrast, oil from olives that were planted in a dung heap in an arid region which had another crop sown between them, or oil that was produced from olives that have not ripened and are still immature, should not be brought as an initial preference, but if it was brought, it's kosher, it's acceptable b'de'evet. 15, to end, all of the meal offerings and libations are acceptable, whether from produce grown in Eretz Yisrael in Israel or the diaspora. They are acceptable from fresh grain or grain from the previous years, provided it's of optimum quality. So it doesn't have to be fresh. And I was learning in where was I learning this? Was it in the previous Rambam shir here, or in my Gemara shir? I think it was my Gemara shir in Bab Metzia, that when it comes to grain, it doesn't work like with fresh fruit and vegetables, that something fresh is wonderful and something not so fresh is problematic. When it comes to grain, fresh grain is not, freshly cut grain is actually not as desirable as older grain. I don't know how old, maybe it needs to be a week old or something, I don't remember the details. But they said there that grain that has been cut some time ago is actually considered of a higher quality than freshly cut, harvested grain. Maybe it's still moist, maybe it works better if it's a bit drier, I'm not sure. I'm far from a farmer, but I remember that, learning that idea. So it can be fresh or from previous years, provided it's of optimum quality. The only exceptions are the Omer offering. Who knows what the Omer offering was brought from? What kind of grain? Unmute and tell us.
Barley.
Barley is correct. Thank you. So, and the 2 loaves that are brought on Shavuot, Shtei Halechem it's called, they must be brought from fresh grain and from Eretz Yisrael. Should we do the quiz? Question number 1, if consecrated wine flour became, fine flour became impure, what should be done with it? Not redeemed? Place inside, should be redeemed? A, B, or C?
I think B.
B?
B. Yes, B.
You all agree? Hey, you got it right. Should be noted, consecrated wine or flowers became impure after being put into a sacred vessel. A, B, or C?
Not sure.
I'm also not sure. I took an educated guess.
B.
I got it right. Hey, miracle. Is oil crushed from an impure consecrated olive permitted to be used as a libation?
Yes. Yes.
Well done, Kent. And finally, may the meal offerings be brought from fresh grain, chadash, or must it be from the previous year's grain, yoshan? You familiar with those terms, chadash and yoshan? Here in Johannesburg, we have the bakeries advertise, all our stuff is yoshan. Or sometimes they tell you it's not yoshan. Many people are fussy that they only have Yoshon, and not everybody keeps that, but anyway. So what about the meal offerings? May the meal be brought from fresh, or must it be from the previous years? What do you say, guys?
Very good. Previous year's grain.
We have a difference of opinion here in our audience. All right, let's see if we get a
Joshua.
check here. No,
No.
wrong. So it may even be brought from fresh grain. Okay, we got 3 out of 4 this time. Hey guys, so I'm apologizing in advance that we're away for most of November. So I've asked Rabbi Yosef Chazdan, who started this whole group, to see if he can get a good substitute for me, because the time difference in America makes it rather difficult for me to do on Zoom from America. I'm going to be in different time zones, and New York at 7 a.m. is difficult enough, but I'll be in Chicago, which will be 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. or I'm not sure. So I can't undertake to do it from overseas. So I look forward to catching up with you in early December, please God. And I
Stay
trust.
safe, travel well, Rabbi.
Thank
Look
you.
after yourself.
safe
Luck
trip,
for-
Rabbi.
luck for this weekend.
Travel
Thank you.
well.
I hope you'll
All
get
the
it.
best.
Wonderful kinners, Rabbi.
Have a safe trip, Rabbi.
Thank
Safe
you
trip.
so much, all of you, and I hope to
Thank
get a
you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ben.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.